Part 1. The letter in the Atici was never supposed to find it. It was a Saturday afternoon. One of those cloudy, restless days when you feel like the walls are closing in. So, I went exploring. My family's old farmhouse had always been full of secrets, creaking floorboards, locked drawers, and that attic no one ever talked about. Dad used to say, "Don't go up there. Nothing but dust and raccoons." But now that he was gone, and Mom was lost in her grief, I wasn't asking for permission anymore. The attic was colder than I expected. Everything smelled like time had frozen wood, dust, old fabric. I was just poking around when I noticed a small wooden box wedged behind a trunk. Inside it was a letter, yellowed, folded neatly, and sealed with wax. My heart skipped. It had my mother's name on it, but it wasn't in my father's handwriting. It was signed, "Forever Thomas." I stared at it for a long time. Thomas? Who the hell was Thomas? Part 2. The name no one spoke of. He didn't open the letter right away. It sat on my nightstand like a loaded gun. That name Thomas was rattling in my brain like a forgotten song I almost remembered. Growing up, I never heard my mom mention anyone by that name. Not once. And yet, there it was, handwritten in delicate script, "Forever Thomas." That night, while Mom was asleep, I finally unfolded it. "My sweet Elena, if you're reading this, something went wrong. I told you I would leave if it meant protecting you, but I never stopped loving you. I never will. Yours always, Thomas." My hands trembled. Elena was my mom's real name. Nobody but close family used it anymore. So why had she hidden this? And who was Thomas protecting her from? I wanted to believe it was just an old fling, but the tone, the fear in his words, this wasn't romance. It was something darker, something dangerous. I needed answers, but the only person who could give them had locked herself in grief and wine bottles ever since Dad died. So, the next morning, I asked her, and that was the first time she slapped me. Part 3. The basement door, her handprint burned on my cheek, but the silence afterward hurt even more. She didn't apologize, just stood there, eyes glassy, breathing shaky, then turned her back on me like I was the stranger. "Don't ever bring up that name again," she muttered. "Why?" I asked. Was he my real father? She froze. I wasn't sure why I said it. I didn't even believe it, until I saw the look on her face, like I'd ripped open a wound that never healed. She walked straight to the liquor cabinet and poured herself 2 fingers of bourbon. Breakfast of the damned. Then she whispered, "Go to school. We'll talk later." But we didn't talk later. We didn't talk at all that night. While she snored in a drunken stupor, I started digging. There were boxes in the basement. Mom always told me not to go near them. Said it was Dad's stuff. But now I wasn't so sure. I crept downstairs, flashlight in hand, and peeled back a tarp covering the oldest box. Inside, Polaroids, letters, newspaper clippings, and in the bottom an old photo of Mom, with Thomas, arm around her, smiling, very much alive. The date on the back? May 1999, 2 years after I was born. Part 4. The man in the photo, me hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the photo. Thomas, smiling with my mother like they'd just fallen out of a summer dream. Except this was 2 years after I was born. 2 years into her marriage to Dad. I tried to swallow down the dread, but it tasted bitter and familiar. The same flavor of secrets I'd lived with my whole life. Was Thomas my real father? The question wouldn't let go. I kept digging through the box, sifting through old receipts, scribbled notes, and more Polaroids. Every shot of Mom and Thomas felt like a betrayal. I couldn't explain a betrayal that belonged to me too. Then I found something that made my stomach drop. A birth certificate. My birth certificate, except the father's name was blacked out, almost aggressively, with a thick marker. It wasn't Dad's handwriting. It looked like hers. Why would she hide this? And why had Thomas written, "If you're reading this, something went wrong"? That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in bed replaying every memory of my parents, every argument, every half-finished sentence, every look that lingered a bit too long. My whole life felt like a script I'd only read halfway through if I wanted the truth. I realized I Had to find Thomas. Part 5. Finding Tomasi didn't even know where to start. All I had was a name. Thomas Callahan. No address, no phone number, nothing recent. But I had the internet. And rage has a funny way of making you resourceful. After 3 hours of scrolling through dead and Facebook profiles, old obituary pages, and public records, I landed on something promising: a man named Thomas Callahan, who once worked as a freelance photographer in Seattle. There was a faded blog from the early 2000s. It hadn't been updated in years, but one post caught my eye. It read, "To my daughter, if life doesn't let me be your father the way I hoped, I pray you still find your way to me. I'll always be waiting." I couldn't breathe. It felt like someone had knocked the wind out of me. There was a P.O. box address at the bottom of the post. No guarantee it still existed, but it was something. I booked a one-way ticket to Seattle. I told my husband I needed a solo trip to clear my head. I didn't mention that I was flying across the country to meet the man who might have been my biological father. When I landed, I wasn't sure what to expect. The city felt gray and unfamiliar, but buzzing with a strange kind of energy, like I was about to uncover something big, something irreversible. The post office was tucked between an abandoned laundromat and a vape store. I handed the clerk a note with the P.O. number. She checked, then disappeared into the back. When she returned, she held out a small, worn envelope. "This came last week," she said. The handwriting on the front was unmistakable, elegant, familiar. My mother's. Inside was a short note. "She's old enough now. If she finds you, tell her everything." There was also an address, handwritten in ink I recognized. Thomas was still alive, and he was waiting. Part 6. The man who was Teddy stood outside the house for almost 30 minutes before I found the courage to ring the doorbell. It was a modest one-story home nestled in the outskirts of Seattle, surrounded by trees and fog. The lawn was unkempt, the paint on the shutters chipped, but there was something oddly peaceful about it, like the kind of place where time moved a little slower. My palms were sweating. What if he didn't want to see me? What if he did and I wasn't ready for the truth? The door opened. He was older than I imagined. Late 50s, maybe early 60s. Thin, graying beard. Eyes that looked just like mine, sharp, almond-shaped, full of questions and sadness. He didn't speak right away, just stared. Then he said my name. Not hello. Not who are you, he said. Samantha. I broke. I hadn't told him my name. I hadn't said a word. But somehow he knew. You knew I'd come? I managed to whisper. He nodded slowly. I always hoped. Your mother said you'd be curious someday. She made me promise I wouldn't come looking, said it was safer for you that way. But I never stopped wondering. I felt like I was floating above myself, watching this moment happen to someone else. He stepped aside. Come in. There's a lot to explain. Inside, the walls were covered in photographs, black and white prints of people, places, and one recurring subject, a woman. My mother, in her 20s, smiling in a way I'd never seen before. He made tea. I didn't touch it. Then, piece by piece, he began to unravel the truth. You were born in chaos, he said. Your mother was in love with me, but she was married to a man with money and influence, the man you called Dad. When she got pregnant, she told me you were mine, but that wasn't something her husband could allow. He threatened us both, told her if she didn't cut ties, he'd make our lives hell. She begged me to disappear, said it was the only way to protect you. I wanted to scream, cry, punch something, but I just sat there, my body frozen in disbelief. And you never fought? I asked. He looked down, ashamed. I did, but not hard enough. I thought maybe someday she'd change her mind, that she'd find your way to me. I wanted to hate him, but I couldn't, because somehow I understood. Part 7. Letters never sent led me down a narrow hallway, the carpet muffling our footsteps, and opened a door to a room that looked like it hadn't changed in decades. Dust-covered books lined the shelves, and in the corner stood an old wooden desk, its surface buried in envelopes. He reached into the bottom drawer and pulled out a worn showbox. I wrote you letters, he said quietly. Every birthday, every Christmas, Every time I saw a little girl who reminded me of you, I sat on the bed, my legs trembling. He handed me the box inside. Dozens, maybe hundreds of letters. Some just a few sentences long, others several pages, all sealed, all unsent. My fingers shook as I picked one up. The date read, December 12th, 2005. My 10th birthday. I opened it. Dear Samantha, I imagine you're blowing out candles today. Maybe you asked for a doll or a bike. Maybe you're just smiling because your mom made you pancakes for breakfast. I wish I could be there. I wonder what your laugh sounds like. I love you. Dottie choked on the word Dad. Not Michael. Not the man who left. Just Dad. I read 5 letters. Then 10. Then more. Each one a thread pulling me closer to a version of my childhood I'd never known. He sat across from me, watching silently, like he was afraid he might break the moment. I didn't know. I whispered. I thought you just didn't want me. His face twisted. I wanted you every day of my life. I just didn't know how to keep you safe and still be in the picture. But why didn't she tell me? I asked. Why didn't my mom let me decide? His voice softened. Because she knew your stepfather would destroy both of us. And maybe she was afraid you'd choose me. That stung. Because deep down, even now, a part of me was choosing him. Choosing answers over silence. Choosing truth over protection. I looked around the room, this shrine to a daughter who'd never visited, whose face he only knew from newspaper clippings and online photos. A girl he loved from afar. And for the first time in years, I felt like someone had been waiting for me all along. Part 8. The woman who raised me there outside his apartment felt thicker, heavier, like the past had wrapped itself around my shoulders and wouldn't let go. I sat in my car for over an hour, staring at the letters I had taken with me, a small bundle tied with string, like fragile memories too sacred to leave behind. But something else weighed on me now. My mother. The woman who tucked me in every night, who packed my school lunches and taught me how to braid my hair. The woman who told me he was a ghost, a mistake, a chapter best forgotten. Was it love that made her lie? Or fear? I drove home in silence, rehearsing what I'd say 1,000 times. But nothing prepares you to confront the person who built your world on half-truths. She was in the kitchen when I walked in, chopping carrots like nothing had changed. She looked up and smiled. You're home late. I held up the letters. Her face dropped like I'd pulled a knife from my pocket. Where did you get those? From him. From Dad. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. I watched 1,000 calculations flash through her eyes. Fight or flight? Deny or confess? Why didn't you tell me? I asked, my voice trembling. She set down the knife. You think it was easy? That I wanted to lie to you? No. I think you did it because it was convenient. Her silence cut deeper than any scream. He never stopped loving me, Mom. He never stopped writing to me. Her eyes filled with tears. I know. You know? I found some of the letters. He sent them to your grandmother's house. I opened a few. She sank into a chair. I was scared. Not of him, but of what it would mean for us. I didn't understand. For us? I built a life for you, Samantha. One with structure, with safety. You had a father figure, a roof over your head, one who hit you, one who controlled everything we did. Her face crumpled. Do you know how many times I almost packed a bag and left? She whispered, but I was afraid he'd take you. Afraid the courts wouldn't believe me. Afraid you wouldn't believe me. So you stayed and cut him out of my life. He didn't fight for you, Sam. Not in court. Not in public. He disappeared. I shook my head. He did fight, just not the way you expected. She stared at the letters, her hands trembling. He was a coward. And maybe I was too. I wanted to scream, to cry, but all I could feel was grief. Grief for the little girl who grew up wondering what she'd done wrong. Grief for the mother who carried her own shame like a second skin. And grief for the man who loved in silence, who filled pages when he wasn't allowed to fill a room. I'm not angry, I said, tears sliding down my cheeks. I'm just tired of the lies. She looked up. So what now? I didn't have an answer, but I knew this. Nothing would ever be the same. Part 9. The final straw that night. I couldn't sleep. Mom had told me everything about the money, the manipulation, even how she had kept quiet all these years out of fear and guilt. But now, it all made sense why she seemed so defeated. Why I never understood our family's silence about certain things. Why Dad always had this control over the house, even without saying a word. I walked into the kitchen the next morning to find Dad drinking his coffee like nothing had happened. The audacity made my blood boil. I couldn't take it anymore. "Why did you lie to me my whole life?" I asked calmly, but my voice trembled. "Why did you turn Mom into a prisoner in her own home?" He blinked at me like I was speaking another language. "Watch your tone, young lady. I'm not a little girl anymore, Dad. I know everything. I know what you did. And guess what? I'm not afraid of you." That was the first time I saw real shock in his eyes. He tried to regain control, to talk down to me like he always did. But I stood my ground. "I'm done. We're done." Mom stood behind me in the hallway, tears in her eyes. But this time, she wasn't crying from fear. She was proud. That was the day we left. Part 10. A new chapter. We left everything behind the house, the furniture, even some of the family photos. It was painful, surreal, but it was freedom. Mom and I moved into a small apartment across town. It wasn't much, but it felt like ours. No heavy silence, no walking on eggshells, no gaslighting, just peace and the unfamiliar sound of starting over. I found a job at a local bookstore and enrolled in evening college courses. Mom started therapy, something she always wanted but never had permission for. Slowly, the color returned to her cheeks. Her laughter, once rare and timid, started filling the rooms. One day, while unpacking a box, I found an old photo of our family back when I was maybe 6 or 7. I stared at it for a long time. The smiles looked real, but I knew better. Now, I didn't throw it away. I put it in a drawer, not to cherish, but to remember, to remind myself of where we came from and why we would never go back. This isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of one we're finally writing. Ourselves, for the first time. I'm not just surviving. I'm living. The end.